Over on the right side of the 3D viewport is the navigation gizmo. This contains several elements with its colored lines and circles and 4 icons underneath. The colored lines and circles represent the world axis and their orientation from the user's viewpoint. If we click directly on one of the colored circles, our viewpoint will change to a preset and named position. For example, clicking on the X circle will change the viewpoint in the 3D viewport to the right view. Clicking on the Z circle moves us to the top view. Clicking on the center circle will move our viewpoint to the opposite end of that axis. For example, clicking on the Z circle for a second time will change our viewpoint from top to bottom. Notice that each color circle has an opposite circle which is a duller version of the first. These 2 circles represent the opposite ends of an axis, the positive end and the negative end. If we move the mouse pointer over one of the duller circles, we'll see a minus sign and the axis letter displayed. When we move the mouse pointer within the area of the controller, a large gray circle appears. If we drag the mouse when the gray circle is showing, we can gain more control over our viewpoint, allowing us to circle around the center of the screen both horizontally and vertically. This circling is known as orbiting. Below the viewpoint controller is the zoom icon. Moving over this icon and dragging upward zooms in on the center of the screen. Dragging down zooms out. Note that this is not shifting our viewpoint but is simply zooming in or out. Another point to note is that it is possible to zoom in too far, making some of the faces disappear. For example, here we end up moving inside the die. Dragging over the move icon allows us to shift our viewpoint left or right, up or down. This movement is known as panning. Clicking on the camera icon switches between the default modeling camera viewpoint and the viewpoint of the camera used in the final render of the scene. Note that the first line of the 3D viewport's text changes to read camera perspective. Clicking on the projection icon switches the projection between orthographic and perspective views. But remember, switching to a fixed viewpoint such as top, left, or front, using the navigation controller, always switches us to orthographic projection, and switching to the render camera view always switches us to perspective projection. An easier way to achieve all the effects available using the navigation gizmo is to make use of the mouse and keyboard. Ideally, we want to have a mouse with 2 buttons and a central wheel and an extended keyboard with a separate numpad area. If these are not available, Blender allows us to emulate their functions by adjusting the preferences settings. To make these adjustments, we must select Edit then Preferences from the top bars menu. In the dialog box that appears, we need to select Input and then check the Emulate Numpad box to allow the standard numeric keys to be used in place of those on an extended keyboard's numpad. Check the Emulate 3-button mouse box to use the combination Alt plus left mouse button as a substitute for pressing the middle mouse button. We've seen that one way we can change viewpoint is to drag on the gray circle that appears within the navigation gizmo, but an even simpler way is to hold down the middle mouse button and drag the mouse pointer within the main area of the viewport. A more controlled way of changing the view is to use keys on the numpad. Each press of the 4 key rotates the view 15 degrees clockwise about a z-axis whose origin is at the center of the screen. Pressing 6 rotates the view 15 degrees counterclockwise about the same axis. 8 and 2 rotate the view about the x-axis. And Shift 4 and Shift 6 rotates it about the y-axis. Orbiting always take place about the center of the 3D viewport. This can be a problem if the object we want to move around is off-center. To handle this situation, we need to start by selecting the object we want to orbit and then pressing the decimal point key on the numpad. This centers the selected object in the 3D viewport and usually zooms in at the same time. After zooming out to an appropriate setting, we can then orbit our object without it shifting off-center. If we want to move exactly 180 degrees from our current viewpoint, we can do this by pressing the 9 key on the numpad. To position the view to a named viewpoint, such as left, top, etc., instead of using the navigation gizmo's colored circles, we can use other values on the numpad. 1 moves us to the front view. Control 1 moves us to the back view. 3 gives the right view, and Control 3, the left view. 7 gives the top view, and Control 7 the bottom view. And, since 9 rotates us by exactly 180 degrees, We can use it as an alternative way of switching to a view in the opposite direction. So, if we've pressed 1 to get a front view, going on to press 9 would give us the back view. Another useful key when changing view is the home key, which adjusts the camera position to ensure that every object in the scene is included in the view. All the other controls in the navigation gizmo also have mouse or keyboard shortcuts. Scrolling the mouse wheel is an alternative way of zooming in and out. Using the plus and minus keys on the numpad will zoom in or out in discrete steps. Holding down Shift and dragging with the middle mouse button will pan in the direction of the drag. Control 4 pans left while Control 6 pans right. Control 8 and Control 2 pans up and down. 0 toggles between the render camera and viewport camera views. And 5 toggles between perspective and orthographic projection. There are 2 more options that are more rarely used. By pressing Shift plus B, we initiate a box zoom. This allows us to drag a box around part of our scene and the camera's zoom will adjust to fill the viewport with the contents of the boxed area. While zooming is normally achieved by adjusting the lens of the camera, by holding down Shift and Control while dragging up or down with the middle mouse button pressed will move the camera itself inwards or outwards. The movement is known as a dolly zoom. At the early stages of building a scene, we generally change viewpoint in order to get a better idea of the position of objects relative to each other. For example, from this viewpoint it looks like the sphere is sitting on top of the cylinder, but if we change viewpoint, we can see that is not the case. One option that can help us when positioning objects is the quad view split, which shows 4 separate views of our scene at the same time. 3 of these views will be the named views top, front, and right, while the 4th is the current viewpoint created by the user. We create this 4-view split by pressing the key combination Ctrl-Alt-Q. We can work in any of the 4 view areas, making it much easier to ensure that the objects in our scene are correctly aligned. The same combination of key presses returns us the standard single viewpoint. One more way of changing viewpoint is reminiscent of video gameplay. Walk mode can only be activated from the View menu in the 3D viewport. Moving down to the navigation entry, we see it has a submenu offering yet other ways of shifting viewpoint. But at the end of this submenu are 2 new options, Fly and Walk navigation. Although we won't cover the Fly option, the Walk option allows us to shift our viewpoint in our Blender scene in much the same way as we might move about within a video game. After choosing the Walk option, we'll see crosshairs in our scene. These indicate the direction in which we can walk to change our viewpoint. Moving the mouse rotates our viewpoint. Pressing W moves us forward. S moves us backward. A to the left and D to the right. E moves us up and Q moves us down. These last 2 only work when gravity is off. While in walk mode, the tab key switches gravity on or off. Gravity is off by default and you probably don't want to switch it on or your viewpoint will start falling. Holding down the Shift key while pressing one of the movement keys will speed up movement. Holding down the Alt key will slow things down. The speed changes created by the Shift and Alt keys are only temporary and vanish when those keys are released. However, if permanent changes in speed are required, we can roll the mouse wheel forward or press the plus key on the numpad to give an increase in speed. Rolling the mouse wheel backward or pressing the minus key on the numpad will decrease the speed. To exit walk mode, we need to press either the left mouse button or the escape key. Here is a brief look at the PDF pages that accompany this video. You can download them from our website.